The carriage wheels groaned beneath Elara as it rolled over the uneven cobblestone path. Each jolt sent shivers of dread coursing through her rigid body. Her hands, once soft and unblemished, now bore crescent-shaped indentations from her own fingernails digging into her palms. 23 days. That's how long they had been traveling through misty forests and desolate mountain passes, ever northward to the land where sunlight was but a distant memory. Opposite her sat Lady Mercia, her father's most trusted adviser, and now her reluctant chaperone. The older woman's face remained impassive, though her eyes betrayed a hint of pity whenever they met Elara's gaze. "We will arrive before nightfall," Lady Mercia said, breaking the silence that had persisted since dawn. "Remember your training. Speak only when addressed, eyes downcast. And for the love of all that is sacred, do not challenge their customs." Elara swallowed the bitter retort that rose to her tongue. What use was there in arguing? The treaty had been signed in blood, her father's and the vampire lord's. Her fate had been sealed with it. "And if I displease him?" Elara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lady Mercia's lips thinned. "Then we will have failed, and the alliance will crumble. Your father's kingdom will fall within a fortnight." Outside, the perpetual twilight of the northern territories cast long shadows across the landscape. Even the trees here seemed different. Taller, darker, their branches reaching like desperate, gnarled fingers toward what little light filtered through the dense clouds above. The carriage slowed, and Elara's heart quickened. Through the small window, she caught her first glimpse of Blackvale Castle. It rose from the mountainside like a growth of black crystal, its spires piercing the low-hanging clouds. No warm lights welcomed weary travelers. No banners fluttered in the chill breeze. It was a fortress designed to intimidate, to instill a sense of insignificance in all who approached. "We've arrived," Lady Mercia announced unnecessarily. She leaned forward, adjusting Elara's silver circlet and smoothing the crimson velvet of her traveling cloak. "Remember who you are. You are the daughter of King Aldric, the Bloodsworn. You are the peace offering that will save thousands of lives." "I am a transaction," Elara corrected, her voice hollow. "A political bride sold to monsters to postpone a war my father cannot win." Lady Mercia's hand stilled on Elara's shoulder. For the first time in their journey, genuine emotion cracked through her composed facade. "Perhaps, but you may yet find purpose in this sacrifice." The carriage door swung open, revealing a tall figure shrouded in darkness. The footman who had attended them throughout their journey was nowhere to be seen. Instead, a pale-faced man with obsidian eyes extended a gloved hand toward Elara. "Welcome to Blackvale, Princess of Aldric," he intoned in a voice like velvet sliding over stone. "I am Cassius, steward to Lord Draven. He awaits you in the great hall." Elara hesitated, then placed her trembling hand in his. The leather of his glove was cool against her skin, and she wondered if it was worn to create the illusion of warmth. Stepping down from the carriage, she felt the weight of the castle's shadow fall over her like a shroud. The courtyard was eerily silent. No birds sang, no servants scurried about their tasks. Even the horses that had pulled her carriage stood unnaturally still, their breath no longer creating clouds in the cold air. "This way, Your Highness." Cassius guided her toward massive doors of blackened iron, each engraved with scenes of ancient battles, humans falling beneath the swords and fangs of their vampire conquerors. Lady Mercia followed closely behind, her hand resting protectively near the silver dagger concealed within her robes, a futile gesture of security that they both knew would prove useless if their hosts decided to break the terms of the arrangement. The doors swung inward without a sound, revealing a cavernous hall lit by floating orbs of cold blue flame. The ceiling arched high above them, supported by columns carved to resemble twisted human forms, their faces frozen in eternal anguish. Along the walls hung tapestries depicting the rise of the vampire houses, their vivid colors unfaded by time. And at the far end, seated upon a throne of black glass and bone, was him, Lord Draven Blackthorn, Alpha of the Northern Covens, Master of Blackvale, and now her betrothed. Even from a distance, Elara could feel the weight of his presence. He did not stand as they approached, but his eyes, silver as moonlight on water, followed her every step. His face might have been carved from marble, sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, and lips that seemed permanently set in a contemplative line. His hair fell in dark waves to his shoulders, adorned with small braids woven with silver threads. Cassius stopped 10 paces from the throne and bowed deeply. "My lord, I present Princess Elara of House Aldrich, daughter of King Aldrich the Blood-Sworn, and Lady Mercia, royal advisor to the Southern Court." Lord Draven inclined his head slightly, the barest acknowledgement. "Princess," he spoke, his voice deeper than Elara had expected, with an accent that hinted at centuries past. "You have journeyed far." Elara sank into a deep curtsy, forcing herself to maintain the pretense of willing submission. "Lord Draven, I am honored by your welcome." The lie tasted like ash on her tongue. "Are you?" A hint of amusement colored his tone. He stood in one fluid motion and descended the 3 steps from his throne. Up close, he was taller than she had anticipated, towering over her by at least a foot. "Somehow I doubt that, but your courtesy is noted." He circled her slowly, like a predator assessing its prey. Elara fought the urge to shiver when he paused behind her, close enough that she could feel the unnatural coolness radiating from his body. "The terms of our arrangement stated that you would arrive before the blood moon," he continued, returning to face her. "You are 3 days early." Lady Mercia stepped forward. "We encountered favorable conditions on the mountain pass, my lord. If our early arrival is inconvenient—" "It is unexpected," he interrupted, his gaze never leaving Elara's face. "But not unwelcome. It will give the princess time to acclimate to her new home before the binding ceremony." Elara's stomach twisted at the mention of the ceremony, the ritual that would tie her life force to his, making her neither fully human nor vampire, but something in between, a living bridge between 2 worlds. "You must be weary from your journey," Lord Draven continued, gesturing to a female vampire who materialized silently beside him. Unlike him, her eyes were a deep crimson, marking her as younger, less powerful. "Lysandra will show you to your chambers. You will join me for the welcoming feast at midnight." The dismissal was clear, but as Elara turned to follow Lysandra, Lord Draven caught her wrist. His touch sent an involuntary shudder through her body, not entirely from fear, which disturbed her more than she cared to admit. "One more thing, Princess," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "The walls of Blackvale have ears. There are those within my court who oppose this alliance. I would advise you to watch what you say, and to whom." He released her, and Elara quickly stepped away, fighting to keep her expression neutral despite the rapid pounding of her heart. Lysandra led them through a maze of corridors, each more elaborate than the last. The deeper they ventured into the castle, the more signs of opulence appeared. Gold-veined marble floors, crystal chandeliers filled with the same spectral blue flames, and artwork that spanned centuries. "These will be your chambers, Princess," Lysandra announced, stopping before a set of double doors inlaid with silver filigree. "Lady Mercia will be housed in the adjoining suite." The rooms beyond were unexpectedly luxurious. A massive 4-poster bed dominated the space, draped in midnight blue velvet. A fire burned in the hearth, casting a warm glow that seemed at odds with the coldness of the castle. Fresh flowers, pale blue roses that shouldn't have been able to bloom in this climate, filled crystal vases throughout the room. "Your belongings will be brought up shortly," Lysandra continued. "There are garments in the wardrobe suitable for tonight's feast. Lord Draven has requested that you wear the silver and sapphire gown." She paused, her crimson eyes assessing Elara with undisguised curiosity. "You are not what I expected." "And what did you expect?" Elara asked, unable to contain her question. A small smile played at the corner of Lysandra's mouth. "Someone more broken, The human princesses sent before you arrived weeping and terrified. Before me? Ilara's blood ran cold. There were others? Lysandra's smile vanished. I've spoken out of turn. Forgive me, princess. She backed toward the door. I will return to escort you to the feast. Until then, please rest. When the door closed behind Lysandra, Ilara turned to Lady Mercia, her composure finally cracking. Others? There were others before me? What happened to them? Lady Mercia's face had paled. Your father assured me this was the first such arrangement between our kingdoms. He lied to you, Ilara whispered, sinking onto the edge of the bed. As he lied to me, what else don't we know? Before Lady Mercia could respond, a soft knock interrupted them. The door swung open to reveal a young human woman bearing a silver tray with a decanter of wine and 2 goblets. "Refreshment, your highness," she murmured, her eyes downcast. As she set the tray on a nearby table, Ilara noticed the twin puncture marks on the side of her neck. Fresh, barely healed. "What's your name?" Ilara asked gently. The servant looked startled by the question. "Nessa, your highness." "Are there many humans in Blackvale, Nessa?" The girl hesitated, glancing nervously toward the door. "A few dozen, your highness. We serve in various capacities. As blood donors?" Ilara pressed, ignoring Lady Mercia's warning look. Nessa's hand unconsciously rose to her neck. "Some of us, yes. It's considered an honor to serve the noble houses. And do you feel honored, Nessa?" The girl's eyes widened in fear. "I should go, your highness. Lord Draven doesn't like us to linger." After Nessa hurried from the room, Lady Mercia rounded on Ilara. "Have you lost your mind? You cannot question their practices before you've even been formally presented to the court." "I need to understand what I'm walking into," Ilara insisted. "If my father lied about previous brides, what else might he have concealed? What really happens during this binding ceremony?" Lady Mercia's shoulders sagged. "I don't know. The details were kept from me as well." She approached Ilara, taking her hands. "But I promise you this, I will not leave you here if I discover any treachery. Treaty or no treaty." Hours later, bathed and dressed in the gown Lord Draven had selected, a creation of silver, silk and sapphires that clung to her curves before flowing to the floor like liquid moonlight, Ilara stood before the mirror, barely recognizing herself. The sapphires at her throat and wrists matched her eyes, and her dark hair had been arranged in an elaborate style that left her neck exposed, a detail that did not escape her notice. When Lysandra arrived to escort them to the feast, she nodded approvingly. "You will turn heads tonight, princess, including some that haven't turned in centuries." The great hall had been transformed. Long tables formed a U-shape around an open area where musicians played haunting melodies on instruments Ilara had never seen before. At least 100 vampires filled the hall, their attire ranging from ancient formal wear to more modern styles. All conversation ceased as she entered. Every pair of eyes, some silver, some crimson, some an unnatural amber, turning to assess the human princess. Lord Draven awaited her at the head table. He had changed into formal attire as well. A black coat embroidered with silver thread that matched his eyes, fitted over a crisp white shirt left partially unlaced at the throat. A single ruby gleamed at his ear, and a ring bearing his house crest adorned his right hand. He stood as she approached, and to her surprise, stepped down to meet her, offering his arm. "Princess Ilara," he said, loud enough for the entire hall to hear. "You honor us with your presence." Ilara placed her hand on his arm, feeling the cool hardness of his skin beneath the fabric. "The honor is mine, Lord Draven." He led her to a seat at his right hand, higher than any other at the table save his own. The symbolism was not lost on the assembly. He was elevating her above his own kind. A tall vampire with hair the color of blood rose from his seat further down the table, his amber eyes flashing with undisguised contempt. "My lord, surely the human should be seated below the salt with the other refreshments." A dangerous silence fell over the hall. Lord Draven's expression didn't change, but Ilara felt a sudden chill emanate from him. "Lord Varys," he said softly, "You forget yourself. Princess Ilara is to be my bride, not a meal, unless you wish to challenge my decision." The last words carried a lethal undertone. Lord Varys held Draven's gaze for a tense moment before lowering his eyes. "Of course not, my lord. I merely thought to observe tradition." "Some traditions," Draven replied, "deserve to die." He turned to Ilara, his voice warming almost imperceptibly. "You'll find, Princess, that not everyone in my court welcomes change. Fortunately, their opinions matter little to me." As the feast progressed, Ilara noticed several things. First, though goblets of a thick crimson liquid were served to the vampires, actual food was provided for her and the few human servants present. Second, Lord Draven barely touched his goblet, his attention seemingly fixed on the interactions around them. And third, beneath the veneer of civility, factions were clearly defined throughout the hall. Those who deferred to Lord Draven with genuine respect, and those whose obedience seemed forced. "Your court seems divided," she observed quietly, when the music grew loud enough to cover their conversation. Lord Draven's lips quirked in what might have been amusement. "Very observant." "Yes, Princess. Not all approve of this alliance with your father's kingdom. And you? Do you approve?" He studied her face, his silver eyes unreadable. "I initiated it," he said simply. Before she could question him further, a commotion at the entrance to the hall drew their attention. A vampire burst in, his clothing torn and bloodied. He staggered forward, collapsing to one knee before Lord Draven's table. "My lord," he gasped, "we've been betrayed. The southern border. King Aldric's forces crossed at dusk. They slaughtered the outpost at Blackmere Pass. They carry weapons of silver steel and blessed fire." A roar of outrage swept through the hall. Lord Varys leapt to his feet. "It was a ruse. The human king sent his daughter to distract us while he mounted an attack." All eyes turned to Ilara, accusations and hunger mingling in their gazes. She felt the blood drain from her face as realization dawned. Her father had never intended peace. He had sent her as a sacrificial pawn, a distraction while he launched the very war this marriage was supposed to prevent. Lord Draven rose slowly, his face a mask of cold fury. The hall fell silent once more, waiting for his judgment. Would he execute her on the spot? Drain her dry as recompense for her father's treachery? Instead, he extended his hand to her. "Come, Princess," he said, his voice carrying an edge she hadn't heard before. "It seems we have much to discuss regarding your father's concept of diplomacy." As Ilara placed her trembling hand in his, uncertain whether she was being led to her death or something else entirely, Lord Draven leaned close to her ear. "Fear not," he whispered, so softly that only she could hear. "Whatever game your father plays, I do not punish daughters for the sins of their fathers. You are under my protection now." The promise in his words offered little comfort, as he led her from the hall, away from the hungry eyes of his court, and into the unknown depths of Blackvale Castle, where secrets older than her kingdom waited in the shadows. Lord Draven's hand remained firm around Ilara's as he led her through a series of corridors she hadn't seen before. Lady Mercia hurried behind them, her breath coming in short gasps as she struggled to keep pace. The sounds of chaos from the great hall grew distant, angry voices debating war, revenge, and blood. They descended a spiral staircase hewn from black stone, illuminated by those same spectral blue flames that seemed to burn without fuel. The air grew colder with each step, carrying the scent of old parchment and something metallic that Ilara couldn't quite identify. "Where are you taking me?" she finally asked, her voice echoing against the stone walls. Lord Draven glanced back at her, his silver eyes gleaming in the dim light. "To the one place in Blackvale where we can speak freely." They reached a massive door, reinforced with bands of dark metal. Lord Draven pressed his palm against it, murmuring words in a language Ilara didn't recognize. The door swung open silently, revealing a vast circular chamber. Ilara gasped despite herself. It was a library unlike any she had ever seen. Shelves spiraled upward for at least 3 stories, connected by wrought iron staircases that seemed to float in the air. Thousands of books, scrolls and manuscripts filled the shelves, some bound in materials she couldn't identify. At the center of the room stood a round table carved from a single piece of white wood that seemed to glow with its own inner light. "My private sanctuary," Lord Draven explained, finally releasing her hand. "The council chambers are directly above us, so they will assume we've gone there to discuss your father's treachery." "I knew nothing of this," Elara said immediately, her voice shaking with barely contained emotion. "I swear to you—" He raised a hand, cutting off her protest. "I'm aware, Princess. If I believed you complicit, we would be having a very different conversation." Lady Mercia stepped forward, her hand resting at her side where Elara knew she kept her concealed dagger. "How can you be so certain of her innocence?" A thin smile touched Lord Draven's lips. "Because I can hear her heartbeat, Lady Mercia. It quickens with fear and indignation, but not with guilt." He turned back to Elara. "Besides, I've lived long enough to recognize when someone is being used as a pawn." He gestured toward the table. "Please, sit. We have little time before my council demands your blood as recompense." Elara moved to the table on unsteady legs, sinking into one of the chairs. The wood felt warm beneath her fingers, almost alive. "What does my father hope to gain? Surely he knows he cannot defeat your forces." Lord Draven's expression darkened as he took a seat across from her. "It's not my forces he aims to defeat, at least not directly. The attack at Blackmere Pass was strategic. It's the location of one of our oldest blood sanctuaries." "Blood sanctuaries?" Lady Mercia asked, remaining standing. "Sacred sites where the first vampires were created," he explained. "They house artifacts of immense power, including the original blood chalices." Elara's mind raced. "The binding ceremony. It requires one of these chalices, doesn't it?" Lord Draven studied her with renewed interest. "Yes. Without it, our alliance cannot be formalized in the traditional way." He leaned forward. "Your father knew this. The question is, how did he know?" A chill ran down Elara's spine as pieces began falling into place. "The previous brides," she whispered. "Lysandra mentioned others before me. What happened to them?" A shadow crossed Lord Draven's face. "That is a complicated history, Princess, one we don't have time to fully explore at present." "Make time," Elara demanded, surprising herself with her boldness. "If I'm to help you, and I assume that's why you've brought me here rather than throwing me to your council, then I need to understand what I'm involved in." Lord Draven's eyebrows rose slightly, and for a moment Elara feared she had overstepped. Then unexpectedly he laughed, a short, rich sound that seemed to warm the air between them. "You are nothing like your predecessors," he said, something like admiration coloring his tone. "Very well. The short version, then. Your kingdom and mine have attempted peace 3 times over the past century. Each time, a princess was sent as a bride. Each time, something intervened." "Intervened?" Lady Mercia pressed. "The first princess fled before the binding ceremony, after being fed lies about what would happen to her. The second was poisoned, we never discovered by whom. And the third—" He hesitated. "The third was actually your aunt, Princess Elara, Mariella Aldrich." Elara felt as though the floor had dropped from beneath her. "My aunt died of a fever when I was a child. Is that what you were told?" Lord Draven's voice was gentle. "Mariella was the closest we ever came to peace. She and my brother Lucian genuinely loved each other. The binding ceremony was days away when she was assassinated. Poison again, though more sophisticated. We had no proof, but we suspected your father." Elara shook her head vehemently. "No, my father wouldn't he?" Lord Draven interrupted. "The same father who sent you here as a distraction while he attacked our sacred site. The same father who told you nothing of the previous attempts at alliance?" Elara felt sick. Her entire life, her father had painted the vampires of the north as bloodthirsty monsters, relentless in their desire to conquer human lands. Yet here was Lord Draven, speaking of peace attempts and assassinations with a genuine grief that couldn't be feigned. "If you suspected my father of killing your brother's bride, why seek another alliance with our kingdom?" she asked. "Because war benefits neither of our realms," he replied simply. "And because I believed that you, specifically, might succeed where others failed." "Me? Why?" Before he could answer, the door to the library burst open. Lysandra rushed in, her crimson eyes wide with urgency. "My lord, the council is assembling. Lord Varys is calling for immediate retaliation against the human kingdoms. He's demanding the princess be used in the blood ritual." Lord Draven stood, his expression hardening into the cold mask Elara had first encountered. "Ritual? He oversteps. The princess is under my protection. He claims ancient law, my lord, blood for blood. The attack at Blackmere took 17 of our kind." Lady Mercia stepped protectively closer to Elara. "What blood ritual?" Lord Draven's jaw tightened. "One that hasn't been performed in centuries. It would use the princess's royal blood to fuel a magical assault against her father's armies. It would kill her," Lysandra added quietly, her eyes meeting Elara's with something like regret. "I need to address the council," Lord Draven said. "Lysandra, take Princess Elara and Lady Mercia to the Eastern Tower. It's warded against intrusion. They'll be safe there until I return." "And if the council overrules you?" Lady Mercia asked. A dangerous gleam appeared in Lord Draven's eyes. "They won't." As he moved toward the door, Elara called out, "Wait, you never answered my question. Why me? Why did you believe I could succeed in creating peace?" Lord Draven paused, his back to her. "Because you share your aunt's gift, though you may not know it yet." He glanced over his shoulder, his gaze intense. "The ability to see beyond the masks people wear, even vampires." With that cryptic statement he was gone, leaving Elara with more questions than answers. Lysandra led them through a series of hidden passages, moving swiftly. "We must hurry," she urged. "Lord Varys has supporters among the guard. If they find you before we reach the Eastern Tower—" "Why are you helping me?" Elara asked as they climbed yet another narrow staircase. "Your loyalty is to your kind." Lysandra's expression softened momentarily. "My loyalty is to Lord Draven. He saved me when others would have let me die. And," she hesitated, "I was your aunt's handmaiden. I saw what she and Lord Lucian might have accomplished together. Perhaps you and Lord Draven can finish what they started." They emerged into a circular room at the top of a tower. Large windows offered a sweeping view of the mountains and forests surrounding Blackvale. In the distance, Elara could see pinpricks of light, torches, perhaps, carried by her father's advancing army. "This chamber is protected by ancient magic," Lysandra explained, touching a rune carved into the doorframe. The symbol glowed briefly. "No one can enter without Lord Draven's permission or my blood key." "Blood key?" Lady Mercia asked sharply. Lysandra held up her hand, showing a thin scar across her palm. "My blood, freely given, is keyed to the ward. It's one of Lord Draven's innovations. Combining vampire magic with human blood, willingly given, creates a protection that neither side can break alone. A fitting metaphor for the alliance he seeks," Elara murmured. "Indeed." Lysandra moved to a cabinet and retrieved a crystal decanter. "You should rest. I'll bring fresh clothing and news when I can." After Lysandra departed, Lady Mercia immediately began inspecting the room, checking the windows and testing the strength of the door. "I don't trust any of this," she muttered. "This could be an elaborate trap." "To what end?" Elara asked, sinking onto a velvet chaise near the window. "If they wanted me dead, they've had ample opportunity. Perhaps they need you alive for this blood ritual Lysandra mentioned." Elara shook her head. "No. I believe Lord Draven. He wants this alliance." She paused, considering. "Or at least, he wants peace." Lady Mercia gave her a searching look. "You've known him less than a day, Princess. Don't allow yourself to be charmed by a pretty face and honeyed words. Vampires are masters of manipulation. As are kings, apparently, Ilara replied bitterly. My father lied to us both. He never intended for this alliance to succeed. We don't know that for certain, Lady Mercia argued, but her voice lacked conviction. Ilara rose and moved to the window, watching the distant lights of her father's army. What did Lord Draven mean about my aunt's gift? About seeing beyond masks? Lady Mercia sighed heavily, abandoning her inspection of the room to join Ilara at the window. Your Aunt Mariella was special. She possessed a rare ability. Some called it the true sight. She could see through deceptions, even magical ones. It made her valuable as a diplomat, but dangerous to those with secrets. And you think I have this ability as well? Ilara asked skeptically. You've always been unusually perceptive, Lady Mercia admitted. I've watched you at court functions since you were a child. You could always tell when someone was lying, couldn't you? Even when they were skilled at deception. Ilara thought back to the countless times she'd known, somehow, when courtiers were being insincere or when ambassadors were hiding their true intentions. She'd never considered it anything but good intuition. If that's true, why wouldn't my father tell me? She asked. Lady Mercia's expression grew troubled. Perhaps because he feared you would see through his own deceptions. A sudden commotion from below interrupted their conversation. Ilara leaned out the window, straining to see. In the courtyard, vampires were gathering, many armed with ancient-looking weapons. Lord Varys stood at the center, his voice carrying up to them. The human king makes a mockery of our traditions. While we entertain his daughter, he slaughters our kin. I say we send him a message. In his daughter's blood. A chorus of agreement rose from the assembled vampires. Lord Draven grows weak with age, Varys continued. He dreams of peace with creatures who would exterminate us if they could. I say it's time for new leadership that will restore the glory of the vampire houses. Lady Mercia pulled Ilara back from the window. This is a coup, she whispered. They're using the attack as an excuse to challenge Lord Draven's authority. And I'm caught in the middle, Ilara realized. Her heart raced as she considered their options. They were trapped in this tower, surrounded by increasingly hostile vampires, with her father's army approaching, an army that had apparently never intended to rescue her in the first place. The door to their chamber suddenly shuddered, the runes flaring bright red. Someone was trying to break through the ward. Stand back, Lady Mercia ordered, finally drawing her silver dagger. The blade gleamed in the moonlight streaming through the windows. The assault on the door intensified, the wood beginning to splinter around the hinges. Lady Mercia positioned herself between Ilara and the entrance, her stance that of a warrior rather than an advisor. When did my father's advisor learn to fight? Ilara asked, backing toward the window. A grim smile touched Lady Mercia's lips. I wasn't always an advisor, Princess. The door exploded inward in a shower of splinters and dust. Through the haze, Ilara could make out Lord Varys, flanked by two other vampires. His amber eyes glowed with triumph. Princess Ilara, he purred, stepping into the room. How convenient that you're already dressed in ceremonial colors, silver and blue. Perfect for the blood ritual. Lady Mercia lunged forward, her silver dagger flashing. She was surprisingly fast for a human, catching one of Varys's companions across the chest. The vampire hissed in pain as the blessed silver burned his flesh. Varys moved with supernatural speed, seizing Lady Mercia's wrist and twisting until the dagger clattered to the floor. Brave but foolish, he snarled, throwing her against the wall with enough force to knock her unconscious. Lady Mercia, Ilara cried, rushing toward her fallen protector. Varys intercepted her, his cold hand closing around her throat. Your father was clever, Princess, he said, lifting her until her feet barely touched the ground. He knew an attack on Blackmere would divide us, knew there were those of us who never wanted this alliance, but his plan has a fatal flaw. Ilara clawed at his hand, struggling to breathe. What flaw? She gasped. Varys's smile revealed elongated fangs. He assumed Lord Draven would protect you at all costs. But once Draven is removed from power, you become a valuable resource, one that will fuel our counterattack against your father's armies. Lord Draven will stop you, she managed, spots dancing before her eyes from lack of oxygen. Lord Draven is otherwise occupied, Varys replied, finally releasing her throat only to grasp her arm. The council deliberates his fate while we speak. Now come. The altar awaits. As he dragged her toward the door, Elara frantically searched for a weapon, anything to defend herself. Her gaze fell on Lady Mercia's silver dagger, now lying mere inches from her feet. In one desperate motion she seized it and plunged it into Varys's side. He roared in pain, releasing her arm as the blessed silver burned into his flesh. Elara didn't waste the opportunity. She fled to the far side of the room, putting the chaise between them. "You'll pay for that, human!" Varys snarled, pulling the dagger from his side with a hiss of pain. The wound smoked, refusing to heal immediately, as vampire injuries typically did. His two companions moved to flank her, cutting off any escape route. Elara held her ground, her mind racing. She thought of Lord Draven's words, that she possessed her aunt's gift, the ability to see through deceptions. If that was true, perhaps she could use it now. She forced herself to focus on Varys, to look beyond his physical appearance to whatever lay beneath. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, gradually, she began to see something. A shadowy aura surrounded him, pulsing with an unnatural rhythm. Within that darkness, she detected a weakness, a flicker of fear beneath his confident exterior. "You're afraid," she said suddenly, her voice stronger than she felt. "Not of me, of Lord Draven, because you know this coup will fail." Uncertainty flashed across Varys's face before he masked it with a sneer. Desperate words from a desperate girl. "No," Elara continued, the true sight, if that's what this was, growing stronger. "There's more. You were involved somehow in my aunt's death, weren't you? That's why you fear Lord Draven discovering the truth." Varys's expression contorted with genuine alarm. "How could you possibly—" He cut himself off, advancing on her with renewed determination. "Enough games. The ritual cannot wait." Before he could reach her, a bone-chilling howl echoed through the tower. The sound was unlike anything Elara had ever heard, part wolf, part something entirely inhuman. Varys and his companions froze, their faces registering unmistakable fear. "Impossible," one of them whispered. "He wouldn't dare invoke the blood form here." A massive shadow fell across the doorway. Elara gasped as a creature straight from nightmare appeared, larger than a wolf, but with the general shape of a man, covered in midnight black fur. Its eyes gleamed silver in the darkness, and its muzzle was drawn back to reveal fangs that would put any normal vampires to shame. With horrifying speed, it launched itself at Varys's companions, tearing into them with claws that seemed to glow with an inner fire. Their screams were cut short as the creature systematically dismembered them, leaving nothing but ash and blood-soaked fragments of clothing. Varys backed away, his earlier bravado evaporated. "My lord," he pleaded, "this was for the good of our kind. The humans will destroy us if we show weakness." The creature growled, a sound that seemed to vibrate through the stone walls of the tower itself. It advanced on Varys with deliberate slowness, savoring his fear. "Please," Varys begged, falling to his knees. "I've served the Blackvale court for 8 centuries. Grant me mercy." The creature paused, tilting its massive head as if considering the request. Then with one lightning-fast motion it seized Varys by the throat and lifted him off the ground, mirroring what Varys had done to Elara moments before. "Mercy," it rumbled, its voice a distorted version of Lord Draven's, "is reserved for those who show it to others." With that, it tore Varys's head from his shoulders in one brutal motion. The vampire's body crumbled to ash before it hit the floor. The creature turned toward Elara, silver eyes meeting her blue ones. She should have been terrified. Any sane person would be after witnessing such violence. Yet somehow she knew with absolute certainty that this beast would not harm her. "Lord Draven," she whispered. The creature inclined its head in confirmation. Before her eyes, its form began to shift and contract, fur receding into skin, claws shortening into human fingers. The transformation was fluid, but clearly painful, if Draven's grimace was any indication. Within moments, he stood before her in human form once more, though his clothing was torn and spattered with blood. His silver eyes still held an otherworldly glow, gradually fading back to their normal state. "Forgive my appearance," he said, his voice slightly ragged. "The blood form is not meant for confined spaces." Elara stared at him, struggling to reconcile the sophisticated lord who had welcomed her to Blackvale with the creature that had just torn 3 vampires to pieces. "What are you?" A tired smile crossed his face. "Something older than the vampires, you know. Something your father fears far more than a mere blood drinker." He glanced at Lady Mercia's still form. "Is she alive?" Elara hurried to Lady Mercia's side, checking her pulse. "Yes, just unconscious." "Good. We must move quickly. Varys's rebellion has split the court, and your father's army draws closer with each passing hour." He offered his hand to Elara. "I can still salvage the alliance, Princess, but I need your help and your trust." Elara looked from his outstretched hand to the pile of ashes that had been Lord Varys. The man before her was clearly dangerous, possibly monstrous by human standards. Yet her newly awakened sight showed her something else beneath his surface, a complex tapestry of determination, honor, and something that might almost be hope. She placed her hand in his. "I'm not certain I trust you yet, Lord Draven, but I believe we want the same thing, peace between our realms." His fingers closed around hers, cool but not cold. "That's a start, Princess Elara, that's a start." As he led her from the devastated tower room, the distant sound of war horns echoed across the valley. Her father's army had reached Blackvale's outer defences. Whatever Lord Draven planned, time was running out. The castle trembled as another wave of magical attacks crashed against its ancient defences. From the northeastern parapet where Lord Draven had brought her, Elara watched violet explosions bloom against the night sky, her father's war mages attempting to breach Blackvale's outer wards. "Your father came prepared," Lord Draven observed, his voice unnervingly calm despite the chaos below. His silver eyes reflected the magical bombardment, giving them an otherworldly glow. "Those are silver fire spells, specifically designed to target vampire strongholds." Elara's hands gripped the cold stone railing. "How long will your defenses hold? Against conventional forces? Indefinitely." He gestured toward a section of the wall where vampire warriors moved with preternatural speed, repelling a group of human soldiers who had managed to scale the outer perimeter. Against these specialized magical attacks, perhaps until dawn. Dawn was merely hours away. The realization sent ice through Elara's veins. "What do we do?" she asked, watching a battalion of her father's elite guard advancing toward the eastern gate, carrying what appeared to be massive battering rams infused with glowing runes. Lord Draven's face hardened. "We move forward with our original plan, the binding ceremony." "Now? In the middle of a siege? Precisely because we're under siege." He turned to her, his expression deadly serious. "If we complete the binding, your father's attack becomes not just an act of war against vampires, but against his own daughter, who is now magically linked to their lord. Even King Aldrich wouldn't risk the political fallout." Elara's mind raced. The binding ceremony, the very thing her father had apparently sent an army to prevent. But why? What was he so afraid of? "You still haven't told me exactly what this ceremony entails," she said, meeting Draven's gaze directly. "Because time is something we no longer have," he replied, taking her arm gently but firmly. "Lady Mercia is being tended to by my physician. Lysandra is preparing the ritual chamber. I can explain everything on the way, but we must act now." As they descended the spiral staircase from the parapet, the castle shook again, more violently this time. Dust and small fragments of stone rain down from the ceiling. The binding ceremony creates a connection between a vampire and a human, Lord Draven explained, as they hurried through corridors increasingly filled with rushing guards and servants. Not like the mindless thralls you may have heard of in human tales. This is a union of equals, a sharing of life force and power. What happens to me? Elara pressed. Do I become a vampire? No. You remain human but enhanced. Stronger, faster healing, extended lifespan. And I... He hesitated. You what? I regain something vampires lose over centuries. Warmth, the ability to walk in daylight, a connection to humanity that prevents the descent into bloodlust that claims so many of my kind. They passed through a section of the castle that seemed older than the rest, the walls carved with symbols Elara couldn't decipher. The air felt different here, heavier, charged with ancient magic. This is what my father fears, isn't it? She realized suddenly. Not an alliance with vampires, but vampires who could walk in daylight. Lord Draven's silence was answer enough. They reached an ornate door guarded by 4 vampires whose silver eyes marked them as Draven's most trusted warriors. They bowed deeply as their lord approached. The chamber is prepared, one reported, but Lady Lysandra reports a problem. The chalice recovered from Blackmere was damaged in transit. Draven's jaw tightened. How badly? She believes it can still conduct the ritual, but the connection may be incomplete. Elara felt a flicker of unease. What does that mean for me? Lord Draven hesitated, clearly weighing how much to reveal. It means the transfer of abilities may be uneven. You might receive more of my attributes than intended, or I might gain less of your humanity than hoped. Or the binding could fail entirely, leaving us both weakened at a time when we can least afford it. The castle shuddered again, and this time Elara heard the distinct sound of stones cracking. The eastern defenses were beginning to fail. We have no choice, she said with more confidence than she felt. Let's proceed. The ritual chamber lay at the heart of Blackvale's oldest section. Unlike the Gothic opulence of the rest of the castle, this space was austere, a perfect circle carved from pale stone that seemed to absorb and then softly reflect the light from dozens of black candles placed around its perimeter. Lysandra awaited them at the center, where a small altar of white marble held the damaged chalice. The artifact was beautiful despite its flaws. Silver and crystal intertwined in an intricate design that seemed to shift subtly when viewed from different angles. A jagged crack ran down one side, leaking a faint crimson luminescence. The damage is worse than I feared, Lysandra said, bowing to Lord Draven. The binding essence is seeping out. Can it be contained? He asked sharply. I've stabilized it temporarily, but we must complete the ritual quickly. Lysandra turned to Elara, her expression softening. Princess, you need to understand what you're agreeing to. Once done, this cannot be undone. Your life will be tied to Lord Draven's. If he dies, you will suffer greatly, though you may survive. If you die, she glanced at Draven, he will feel your death as if it were his own. The weight of the decision pressed down on Elara. Everything had happened so quickly. Her arrival at Blackvale, her father's betrayal, the siege. She hadn't had time to truly consider what binding herself to this ancient vampire lord would mean. Yet in her heart, she knew there was no other path forward that didn't end in bloodshed. I understand, she said finally. What must I do? Lysandra directed her to stand opposite Lord Draven, the altar between them. The ritual requires an exchange of blood freely given, mixed within the chalice, and then consumed by both participants. Elara swallowed hard, but nodded. Lord Draven removed his torn jacket, rolling up the sleeve of his shirt to expose his forearm. Lysandra produced a silver knife with runes etched into its blade. Lord Draven first, she instructed. Then the princess. With practiced precision, she drew the blade across Draven's forearm. His blood, darker and thicker than human blood, flowed into the damaged chalice, seeming to be drawn into it rather than simply falling. When Lysandra turned to Ilara, the princess extended her arm without hesitation. The cut stung, but Ilara didn't flinch as her bright red blood joined Draven's in the chalice. The mixture began to glow, pulsing with an inner light that cast eerie shadows across their faces. "Now you must speak the vows," Lysandra said, stepping back from the altar. "Lord Draven, begin." He fixed his silver gaze on Ilara, his voice resonating with power as he spoke in that ancient language she had heard earlier. After each phrase, Lysandra translated, "With my blood, I offer protection. With my strength, I offer support. With my life, I offer alliance. What is mine becomes yours. What is yours becomes mine. Two realms joined through two souls." When he finished, Lysandra nodded to Ilara. "Repeat the words as best you can, princess." Ilara struggled through the unfamiliar syllables, her tongue stumbling over the ancient vampire language. To her surprise, with each phrase she spoke, the words seemed to become clearer, as if the language itself was opening to her understanding. As she completed the final phrase, the mixture in the chalice flared brilliantly, forcing them all to shield their eyes. When the light subsided, the liquid had transformed into something that resembled liquid silver shot through with threads of blue, the same blue as Ilara's eyes. "Drink," Lysandra instructed. "Lord Draven first, then immediately the princess." Lord Draven lifted the chalice to his lips, his eyes never leaving Ilara's as he drank. The moment the mixture touched his lips, a visible shudder passed through his body. He handed the chalice to Ilara, his hand trembling slightly. Ilara hesitated only a moment before raising the chalice to her own lips. The liquid was neither hot nor cold, but seemed to vibrate with energy as it passed her lips. She managed 3 swallows before a sensation like lightning striking coursed through her veins. She gasped, dropping the chalice, which shattered upon impact with the floor. The remaining mixture splashed across the white marble, sizzling where it touched the stone. "Princess!" Lysandra moved toward her, concern evident in her crimson eyes. Ilara couldn't answer. Her entire body felt aflame, every nerve ending singing with pain and power intertwined. She was vaguely aware of falling to her knees, of Lord Draven doing the same across from her. Through tear-blurred eyes, she saw his face contort in a mirror of her own agony. Then, abruptly, the pain vanished, replaced by an extraordinary awareness. She could feel Draven's presence in her mind. Not his thoughts, exactly, but his emotions, his physical state, his very essence. And more than that, she could sense the castle around them, the vampires defending its walls, the humans attacking from without. It was overwhelming. Like suddenly gaining new senses she had no framework to understand. "Ilara," Draven's voice came both from across the altar and somehow from within her own mind. "Focus on my voice. The disorientation will pass." She struggled to do as he instructed, using his voice as an anchor amid the flood of new sensations. Gradually, the world stopped spinning, and she was able to raise her head. "Something's wrong," Lysandra said, looking from Ilara to Draven with growing alarm. The binding wasn't supposed to manifest this strongly. The damage to the chalice. A tremendous crash interrupted her, the sound of massive stones collapsing somewhere nearby. The chamber itself remained intact, but dust sifted down from the ancient ceiling. "They've breached the east wing," Draven said, rising to his feet with visible effort. He extended a hand to Ilara, helping her up. "The binding has weakened me more than anticipated. I can feel the daylight approaching. It burns already." Ilara could feel it too, a growing sensitivity to the coming dawn, though it was still hours away. Yet alongside this new vulnerability, she sensed something else building within her, power, raw and untamed. "I feel different," she said, looking down at her hands. The cut on her arm had already healed, leaving not even a scar. "Stronger. The binding transferred more of my abilities to you than intended," Draven confirmed, his expression troubled, "and took more of your humanity from me than planned. What does that mean for us?" Before he could answer, the chamber door burst open. A vampire warrior staggered in, blood streaming from multiple wounds. "My lord," he gasped. "They've taken the East Wing, human soldiers led by the king himself." Ilara's heart seized. "My father is here? In person?" The warrior nodded grimly. "With his royal guard and war mages, they're moving toward the Great Hall." Lord Draven straightened, his face hardening into the cold mask Ilara had first encountered. "Then we meet them there. Lysandra, gather whatever loyal forces remain. It's time to end this." "You're not at full strength," Lysandra protested. "Neither is the princess's father," Draven replied, glancing at Ilara. "He doesn't know what his daughter has become." As they hurried through the castle toward the Great Hall, Ilara felt the new power within her stabilizing, integrating with her human form. Her senses were sharper. She could hear the clash of steel and shouts of battle from corridors away, could smell the distinct scent of human blood mixed with the ashen remains of fallen vampires. Most disconcerting was her reaction to the former. The scent of blood called to her in a way that was both frightening and exhilarating. She pushed the feeling down, focusing instead on the task ahead. "My father won't stop," she said as they approached the Great Hall. "Whatever his true agenda, he's committed to it fully." "I know," Draven replied. "That's why we must convince him the rules have changed." The Great Hall had become a battlefield. Royal guards in King Aldric's colors fought against vampire warriors, while war mages cast spells from the periphery, their hands glowing with destructive energy. The massive stained glass window at the far end had been shattered, allowing the first hint of pre-dawn light to filter through, light that caused the vampires to hiss and retreat to the shadows. And there, directing it all from the center of the hall, stood King Aldric himself. Ilara barely recognized her father. Gone was the diplomatic ruler who had bid her a tearful farewell weeks ago. This man wore battle armor etched with anti-vampire runes, his face set in a mask of cold determination as he cut down a young vampire with a sword that gleamed with blessed silver. "Father!" Ilara's voice rang out over the chaos, amplified by her new abilities. The fighting paused as all eyes turned toward the entrance where she stood with Lord Draven. King Aldric froze, his sword dripping crimson, his eyes widening as they fell upon his daughter. "Ilara," he called, disbelief evident in his voice. "Step away from him. We've come to rescue you." Ilara stepped forward, acutely aware of how she must appear to her father. She could feel the changes in herself, her eyes now ringed with silver around the blue, her skin paler, her movements more fluid and predatory. Not a vampire, but no longer fully human either. "Is that what you call this, father? A rescue?" She gestured to the dead scattered across the hall. "Or is it the culmination of your true plan?" King Aldric's face hardened. "You don't understand what's at stake, what that creature beside you truly is." "Then explain it to me," she challenged. "Explain why you've attacked a castle housing your own daughter. Explain why you destroyed a blood sanctuary vital to the binding ceremony. Explain what happened to my Aunt Mariella." The last demand seemed to strike her father physically. He flinched, his composure cracking momentarily. "Your aunt was bewitched," he spat. "As you have been. The binding must be reversed immediately before it's too late." "Too late for what, father?" "For humanity," he roared, his control finally breaking. "Do you think vampires are content with their northern territories, with their inability to walk in daylight? The binding ceremony doesn't just create a diplomatic alliance, it gives them what they've always wanted, immunity to the sun. If vampires could move freely by day, nothing would stop them from conquering every human kingdom." Lord Draven stepped forward, his silver eyes locked on the king. "Is that what you believe, Aldric, that we seek domination? After centuries of maintaining the borders between our realms?" "I know your kind," the king snarled. "I've seen what happens when vampires gain power over humans. My own sister—" He broke off, pain contorting his features. "What about Aunt Mariella?" Ilara pressed, moving closer to her father despite the danger. She could sense the truth hovering just beneath the surface of his words, waiting to be dragged into the light. King Aldric's eyes met hers. And in them she saw not the calculating manipulator she'd recently come to know, but the grieving brother he must have been decades ago. "She changed," he said, his voice dropping so that only Elara and Draven could hear him. "After the binding with Lord Lucian, gradually at first, increased strength, sharper senses. But then her appetites changed, her compassion faded. By the end, she was more vampire than human, thirsting for blood, viewing her own people as prey." Elara felt Draven stiffen beside her. "That's impossible," the vampire lord said. "The binding preserves humanity. It doesn't erode it. Unless—" Lysandra's voice came from behind them, quiet with realization. "The chalice was damaged then as well." Draven turned sharply. "What?" "The chalice used for Princess Mariella's binding. It could have been compromised, just like ours was tonight. If so, the transfer of attributes would have been unbalanced, just as—" She looked meaningfully at Elara. "Just as they are now," Elara finished, a cold dread settling in her stomach. She touched her lips, remembering the insistent call of blood she'd felt earlier. "Father, did you poison the chalice? Both then and now at Blackmere?" King Aldric's face was answer enough, grief and guilt warring with stubborn conviction. "I did what was necessary to protect humanity. My sister was lost to us even before her physical death. I couldn't let the same happen to you, Elara. I couldn't watch another daughter of Aldric become a monster." Lord Draven's voice was dangerously soft. "So you murdered my brother's bride, sabotaged peace between our realms for decades, and now you've compromised your own daughter's binding. For what? To justify your continued war against my kind? To prevent the extinction of humanity!" King Aldric shouted. "Look at her already. The silver in her eyes, the predator in her stance. The binding has already begun to corrupt her just as it did Mariella." Elara stepped between them, sensing the violence about to erupt. "Enough! Father, you've been fighting the wrong enemy. The binding doesn't have to corrupt. It was your interference that caused Aunt Mariella's transformation. And now you've done the same to me." As she spoke, she felt something shift within her, the vampire attributes from Draven asserting themselves more strongly. A sharp pain lanced through her gums as her canines lengthened slightly, and her vision sharpened further, the world taking on a reddish tinge around the edges. Lord Draven sensed it through their bond. "Elara," he warned quietly, "the binding is destabilizing." King Aldric saw the changes too. His eyes widened in horror, then narrowed with grim resolve. He raised his hand, and his war mages stepped forward. "We must end this now. The binding must be severed before my daughter is lost completely." "And how do you propose to do that?" Draven asked, moving protectively closer to Elara. "The only way possible," King Aldric replied, his voice hollow with determination. "Death breaks all bonds." Before anyone could react, he signaled to his war mages. As one, they unleashed a barrage of silver fire directly at Lord Draven, powerful enough to incinerate even an ancient vampire. Elara didn't think. She moved on pure instinct, faster than she'd ever moved before, throwing herself in front of Draven just as the magical attack reached them. The last thing she saw was her father's face contorted in horror as he realized his target had changed. Then the silver fire engulfed her, and her world exploded into agony and light. The world was silence and darkness. Then, gradually, sensation returned. First pain, sharp and insistent, then the distant murmur of voices arguing. Elara floated in this half-conscious state, unable to open her eyes, but increasingly aware of her surroundings. Someone was holding her hand, their skin cool against hers. Through the bond, she felt Draven's presence, weakened but alive. "She shouldn't have survived," came her father's voice, tight with emotion. "No human could withstand that much silver fire." "She isn't fully human anymore," Draven replied, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. "Just as I am no longer fully vampire. The binding altered us both more profoundly than intended." Elara struggled to open her eyes. Her body felt weighted with lead, each breath a conscious effort. When she finally managed to lift her eyelids, the world appeared in startling clarity, too sharp, too bright. The great hall was in ruins around them. Dawn light streamed through the shattered windows, falling directly across Draven's face as he knelt beside her. "You're in sunlight," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Draven's lips curved into a faint smile. "One benefit of our compromised binding. The daylight weakens, but no longer burns me." He helped her sit up slowly, supporting her weight. "How do you feel?" "Strange," she admitted. Her senses were overwhelmed. She could hear heartbeats throughout the castle, smell blood and ash and fear. Most disconcerting was the hunger that gnawed at her insides, a craving unlike anything she'd experienced before. "The vampire aspects of the binding are stronger than they should be," he finished, concern evident in his expression, "but not irreversible." King Aldrich stepped forward, his battle armor scorched and dented. The fight had gone out of him, replaced by something Elara had rarely seen in her father, uncertainty. "You saved him," he said, his voice hollow with disbelief. "After everything I told you about what happened to Mariella, you chose to protect a vampire lord." "I chose to prevent more bloodshed," Elara countered, allowing Draven to help her to her feet. She swayed slightly, her newfound strength at war with the lingering effects of the silver fire. "And I chose to make my own decisions, not follow the path of fear and hatred you've carved for decades." Her father flinched as if struck. "Everything I've done was to protect our people, to protect you. By lying to me, by sending me into a binding ceremony, you deliberately sabotaged." The anger that rose within her felt dangerous, primal. She could feel her canines lengthening in response to her emotions, and forced herself to take a steadying breath. "The corruption in Aunt Mariella's binding was your doing, not Lord Lucien's. Your interference caused exactly what you feared. And now the same corruption taints your binding," King Aldrich insisted, though with less conviction than before. "Look at yourself, Elara. The fangs, the eyes. You thirst for blood already." "Yes," she admitted, surprising him with her candor. "I do. But unlike Aunt Mariella, I know why this is happening. And knowledge is power, Father." Lord Draven's hand settled on her shoulder, a steadying presence. "The imbalance in your binding can be corrected," he said, addressing both Elara and her father. "Not reversed, but stabilized. I've spent centuries studying what went wrong with my brother's binding to Princess Mariella." King Aldrich's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "You knew about the corruption." "I suspected," Draven replied. "Lucian wrote to me of subtle changes in Mariella's temperament before her death. Changes that shouldn't have happened with a proper binding. I never knew the cause until now." He turned to Elara, his silver eyes solemn. "There is a second chalice. One my brother hid away after Mariella's death. With it, we could perform a stabilizing ritual, not to undo our binding, but to balance it properly." "Where is this chalice?" Elara asked. "In the catacombs beneath Blackvale, in my brother's tomb." King Aldrich laughed bitterly. "Convenient, another ritual, another chance for vampiric manipulation." "Father, enough," Elara said sharply. "Your crusade against vampires has cost countless lives on both sides. It cost Aunt Mariella her sanity and ultimately her life. It nearly cost me mine." She stepped toward him, fighting the predatory grace that now infused her movements. "I am still your daughter, still a princess of Aldrich. But I am also bound to Lord Draven and, through him, to the future of both our realms." She gestured to the devastation around them, vampire and human bodies alike lying scattered across the once grand hall. "Is this the legacy you wish to leave? Endless war and mistrust? Or will you finally accept that there can be another way?" Something in her father's eyes changed as he looked at her. Not the monster he feared she would become, but the daughter who had always possessed a wisdom beyond her years. "What would you have me do?" he asked quietly. "Order your forces to stand down," she replied without hesitation. Allow Lord Draven and me to complete the stabilizing ritual. Then we negotiate, truly negotiate, a lasting peace between our realms. For a long moment, King Aldrich stood silent, the weight of decades of hatred and fear visibly pressing upon him. Then slowly he removed his helmet and set it aside. "Captain," he called to his royal guard, "sound the retreat. All forces are to withdraw to the outer courtyard and await further orders." The captain hesitated, clearly shocked. "Your Majesty." "Do it," the king commanded. "Enough blood has been spilled this day." As the orders spread and the sounds of fighting throughout the castle gradually subsided, Elara turned to Lord Draven. "The catacombs," she said. "How soon can we reach them?" "Now," he replied, offering his hand. "Though you should know, the stabilizing ritual carries its own risks." "What risks?" His expression grew grave. "It could complete our transformation instead of balancing it. You might become more vampire than human. I might become more human than vampire. Either way, we would both be forever changed." "We're already changed," she replied, taking his offered hand. "At least this way, it would be by our choice, not by sabotage." King Aldrich stepped forward. "I'm coming with you," he declared, his tone brooking no argument. "If my daughter risks her humanity, I will bear witness." Draven regarded him coolly, then nodded once. "Very well. Lysandra," he called to his loyal servant, who had been quietly organizing the remaining vampire forces, "you're in command until our return. See that the truce holds." The descent into Blackvale's catacombs felt like journeying into another world. Ancient stone steps spiraled downward past the castle's foundations into bedrock, carved with symbols that predated both human and vampire civilizations. The air grew thick with the scent of earth and old magic, and even with her enhanced vision, Elara found herself reaching for Draven's hand in the gloom. "The oldest vampires were laid to rest here," Draven explained as they navigated narrow passages lined with alcoves containing sarcophagi. "Including my brother." "When did he die?" Elara asked softly, sensing the grief that still emanated from Draven through their bond. 3 months after your aunt," he replied. "Officially, he fell in battle against human forces. In reality, he took his own life. The pain of losing Mariella, combined with his belief that their binding had somehow corrupted her, it was too much for him to bear." King Aldrich, following close behind them, made a sound that might have been regret. "If what you say is true, if my interference caused Mariella's corruption, then I am responsible for both their deaths." "Yes," Draven said simply, offering neither absolution nor further condemnation. They reached a chamber larger than the others, its walls lined with intricate carvings depicting the ancient history of vampires, not as monsters, but as a separate evolution of humanity, blessed or cursed with immortality and heightened senses, yet forever severed from the sun. At the center stood a black marble sarcophagus, its lid bearing the sculpted likeness of a vampire lord whose features mirrored Draven's own, though softer somehow. Beside it was a smaller memorial, an empty stone bier carved with the emblem of House Aldrich. "He insisted she be commemorated here," Draven explained, "though her body was returned to your kingdom." "I had no idea," King Aldrich murmured. "There is much you never knew about their relationship," Draven replied, approaching the sarcophagus. "Just as there is much you don't know about mine with your daughter." With reverence, he placed his hands on the lid and pushed. The heavy marble slid aside with a grating sound, revealing not just the preserved body of his brother, but an array of artifacts arranged carefully around it. Among them, gleaming in the faint light of the phosphorescent fungi that lined the walls, was a chalice identical to the one used in Elara's binding, but intact. "The Chalice of Balance," Draven said, lifting it carefully. "My brother meant to use it to help Mariella before he discovered her death." Elara stepped closer, drawn to the artifact. It hummed with a power she could feel through her enhanced senses. "What must we do?" The ritual is simpler than the binding, Draven explained, but requires absolute trust between participants. Our blood must be freely given once more, but this time with full knowledge and acceptance of what we might become. He set the chalice on the stone bier, meant for Mariella, then produced a small silver dagger from his belt. Princess Ilara, are you certain you wish to proceed? Once done, there is no return to who you were before. Ilara glanced at her father, whose face was a mask of conflicted emotions, then back to Draven. Through their bond, she could feel his concern for her, his determination, and beneath it all, a growing affection he couldn't or wouldn't fully conceal from her. I'm certain, she said firmly. I choose this path, knowing its consequences. Draven nodded, then sliced his palm, allowing his dark blood to flow into the chalice. It moved differently than before, more slowly, almost reluctantly, as if his blood had already become more human. Ilara took the dagger next, drawing it across her palm without hesitation. Her blood, in contrast, flowed eagerly into the chalice, darker than it should have been for a human. When their blood met, instead of mixing completely as before, it formed a swirling pattern of crimson and near black, like oil and water refusing to combine. Now we speak the vows again, Draven instructed, but modified. Repeat after me. What was taken, freely given. What was broken, freely mended. Balance in blood, balance in spirit. Ilara repeated the words, her voice joining his in perfect harmony that echoed through the ancient chamber. As the final syllable faded, the blood in the chalice began to glow, not with the blinding light of the binding ceremony, but with a gentle, pulsing radiance that seemed to beat in rhythm with their hearts. Drink, Draven said, lifting the chalice to her lips first this time. The liquid tasted different, not metallic like blood, but sweet and cool like spring water. Ilara drank deeply, then passed the chalice to Draven, who consumed the remainder. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a curious sensation swept through Ilara, not pain like before, but a tide of warmth that seemed to wash away some of the sharper edges of her vampire traits. Her senses dimmed slightly, the overwhelming input fading to a manageable level. The hunger that had gnawed at her receded, though it didn't disappear entirely. Across from her, Draven underwent his own transformation. The deathly pallor of his skin warmed subtly, and his silver eyes took on flecks of a color that matched Ilara's blue. He drew a deep breath, a genuine breath, not the mimicry of respiration that vampires maintained. It worked, he said, his voice filled with wonder. Balance, not dominance of either nature. King Aldrich stepped forward, studying his daughter carefully. Ilara, how do you feel? Like myself, she replied truthfully, but more. I can still sense everything, the heartbeats, the emotions. But they don't overwhelm me now, and the thirst... It will remain, Draven said gently, but controlled, manageable. You'll need blood occasionally, but not often and not much. And you? She asked. What has changed for you? A smile, unlike any she had seen before, transformed his face. Genuine, warm, almost human. I feel alive. Truly alive in a way I haven't for centuries. He extended his hand into a shaft of dim light filtering down from above. And I can walk in daylight without pain, though I suspect prolonged exposure would still weaken me. King Aldrich watched their exchange with a complex mixture of emotions playing across his weathered face. So it is done, he said finally. My daughter is part vampire, and the vampire lord is part human. Where does that leave our kingdoms? Ilara turned to her father, feeling a new confidence flow through her. It leaves us with an unprecedented opportunity, father. Lord Draven and I represent something entirely new, a true bridge between human and vampire. Neither fully one nor the other, a living symbol of what our realms could become, Draven added, moving to stand beside her. And what is that exactly? King Aldrich asked, though his tone had lost much of its earlier hostility. Allies, Ilara said simply, not through forced marriage or political maneuvering, but through understanding. Humans fear vampires because they don't understand them. Vampires disdain humans because they've forgotten what it means to be mortal. You propose to change centuries of hatred and mistrust through what? Symbolic leadership? Her father sounded skeptical, but not dismissive. We start with trade, Draven said pragmatically. Vampires have access to ancient knowledge and magical resources humans need. Humans produce food and goods that improve vampire quality of life, even if we don't strictly need them for survival. Cultural exchange, Ilara continued. Selected humans invited to study at Black Veil. Vampire scholars welcomed at human universities. And slowly, Draven concluded, we introduced the concept of more bindings, voluntary ones, properly performed, creating more bridges between our peoples. King Aldrich was quiet for a long moment, considering their words. You make it sound so simple, he said at last. But centuries of bloodshed cannot be wiped away with idealistic plans. No, Ilara agreed. It will take time. Generations, perhaps. But it must begin somewhere. She stepped toward her father, taking his hands in hers. It can begin here, today, with your choice. Continue a war that has cost us so much, or embrace a new path forward. The king looked down at their joined hands, his weathered and calloused from years of wielding sword and scepter, hers now bearing the subtle strength of her changed nature. He seemed to age before their eyes as the weight of his past decisions pressed upon him. I killed my own sister, he whispered, the confession wrenched from somewhere deep within him, not directly but through my interference. I convinced myself it was necessary, that she had become a monster. But perhaps the only monster was my fear. He lifted his gaze to meet Draven's. Can there truly be peace between our kinds? Not perfect harmony, Draven replied honestly, not immediately. But peace, yes, I believe so. Your daughter has shown me that humanity has strengths I had forgotten. Perhaps I can remind your people that vampires were human once too. Dawn had fully broken above them, sunlight streaming down through hidden apertures in the ceiling of the catacombs. It illuminated the three of them, vampire lord, human king, and the princess who was now both and neither, in a tableau that seemed to echo across centuries of conflict and possibility. King Aldrich straightened, something of his regal bearing returning. I will need guarantees, treaties with specific terms. My council will demand assurances. Of course, Draven nodded, as will mine. And you too? The king looked between them. This binding is permanent, as I understand it. Yet it was forced upon you both by political necessity, not choice. Ilara felt a flush rise to her cheeks as Draven's gaze turned to her, intense and questioning. Through their bond, she sensed his uncertainty, not about the alliance, but about her feelings toward him personally. The binding cannot be undone, she acknowledged, but what grows from it will be our choice. She met Draven's eyes directly. I came to Black Veil expecting a monster and found a man trying to forge peace despite centuries of reasons to seek revenge. Whatever comes next between us will be built on that truth, not on political expediency. Something eased in Draven's expression. Wise words, princess. He offered his arm to her in a formal gesture. Shall we return above and begin the work of peace? As they ascended from the catacombs, Ilara felt the first genuine stirrings of hope since her carriage had rolled through Black Veil's gates. The castle that had seemed so forbidding now felt different, still ancient and powerful, but no longer oppressive. Or perhaps it was she who had changed, seeing with new eyes what had always been there. In the great hall, vampire and human forces maintained an uneasy truce, watching warily as their leaders emerged from below. Lysandra was the first to approach, bowing deeply to Draven, before turning curious eyes on Ilara. It is done, she asked. It is begun, Draven corrected, his voice carrying throughout the hall. Today marks not just a balancing of our binding, but the first step toward a new age for both our realms. King Aldrich stepped forward. I, King Aldrich of the Southern Realms, hereby declare an immediate cessation of hostilities against Black Veil and all territories under Lord Draven's protection. A murmur ran through the assembled forces, surprise, disbelief, and cautious relief mingling in the air. Draven's response was equally formal. "I, Lord Draven Blackthorn, Master of Blackvale and Alpha of the Northern Covens, accept this cessation and pledge that no vampire under my authority shall harm any human under King Aldrich's protection." Ilara moved to stand between them, a physical embodiment of the bridge they sought to build. "And I, Princess Ilara, daughter of Aldrich and bound to Blackvale, will serve as ambassador between our realms, working to ensure that this moment of peace grows into a lasting alliance." As the sun rose higher over Blackvale Castle, illuminating ancient stones that had stood in perpetual shadow for centuries, Ilara felt the weight of destiny settling upon her shoulders. The path ahead would not be easy. Prejudices ran deep on both sides, and trust would come slowly, if at all. But for the first time since the carriage wheels had groaned beneath her on that cobblestone path 24 days ago, she felt not dread, but purpose. Not resignation, but determination. The sacrifice that Lady Mercia had spoken of had transformed into something else entirely, a chance to forge a future neither humans nor vampires had dared to imagine. And perhaps in time, even love might grow in the spaces between heartbeats, in the silence between two souls now eternally bound by blood and choice.